Welcome to Applying Type to Medical Education. My name is Matt Michaud.
And my name is Coudret, and we're learning specialists, and we're part of the student development team. Today is really all about a starting place to think about type and also its application to learning and teaching. Matt and I aren't going to have all the answers, but we hope to get you thinking about these concepts and also share some strategies along the way. We also hope to model what we're talking about throughout our presentation today. One quote that I wanted to put out there to begin with, and you'll see this emerge through the different strategies we talk about, has to do with learning. And the idea behind it is those that do the work do the learning. And you'll see how that ties into the strategies that we're going to share with you today.
Our objectives for this project were pretty straightforward. We wanted to think about learning and success in medical school.
We also want to introduce success types, as well as the implications for learning and teaching.
Success types really examines our preferences for learning and teaching. Perhaps one of the biggest mistakes we make as learning professionals is we assume that everyone learns the material exactly the way that we do. And so if we are teaching it the way that we learned, everyone is going to understand what we're doing.
So what does success types do for us? Well, it will talk to us about preferences for learning and teaching, give us a sense of that. It'll help us understand how we deal with professional stressors as facilitators of learning experiences, and how, as instructors, we actually prefer to do our own self-management and manage our time.
One of the things that we would like to do is share with you at the College of Medicine Phoenix in the class of 2019 how our students break down in type preferences. Perhaps the most intriguing part of this information as we share it throughout the workshop is that we have 4 years of data that all show us that these percentages are fairly consistent from year to year and is truly representative of medical students here in Phoenix. So returning to the idea that teachers tend to project their learning style onto the classroom, we know that instructors are vulnerable when they're in front of a class, vulnerable in preparing new information. And one of the things that extroverted instructors will do is they truly have a preference for acting first and then reflecting. So they enjoy creating multiple conversations and enjoy the feedback from multiple conversations in class when they're discussing.
In terms of introversion, the instructor taking the approach of reflecting first, being really well prepared, and then putting those thoughts into action in the classroom. In thinking about introversion, the instructor is reflecting well in advance, has ideas in mind, and then puts them into action in the class.
This continuum that we're looking at, how do you take in information, we have really two dichotomies, but I would say that a reminder, we do both of these, but it's about where we have our preference of what we do. Sensing types are very detail-oriented, very fact-driven, and very step-driven. They like to take information experientially and truly enjoy the details. The smaller the detail, the more important the detail in their mind.
If you take a look at the image in the right-hand corner of the screen, the top portion of the picture gives you a sense of how an ed may look at it. They may see, the color of the car, they might see the rim and wheel and say, hey, that's a picture. Where a sensing type is going to build that structure up in their head, want to know exactly what they're looking at and all the parts that go together and know exactly what type of car we're looking at.
So just as a recap, the sensing learner likes to collect information from steps and details. The intuitive learner gets bored sometimes with steps and details and really likes understanding the big picture, not needing to have every detail filled in. In our 2019 class, we found that 80% of our students are sensing types. They search and crave for details. And we know that 20% of our students were intuitive types who tend to really see the big picture first and then learn the details second. I think this is interesting for us in a medical school because we know that differential diagnosis is going to come from our ability to see the pattern and the big picture first and then go down on the details to do our confirmation. Our learning that we've established and created in medical schools, though, tends to look at the details first and hope that we get the big picture second. Students are really pushed on this continuum to develop both their sensing and their intuitive skills in equal amounts.
We can take a look at some teaching examples in terms of what that may look like in a classroom. An intuitive type often will be sharing great stories, analogies from their experiences, often coming up with multiple ideas in the moment, new ideas coming to them that they would like to share, giving examples upon examples upon examples, and often will use PowerPoints very visually.
In this continuum, thinkers are the traditional Spock. They use logic. The needs of the many are outweighed by the needs of the few. What is logical in this time and space, and we could be repeated. Feelers tend to be more like Captain Kirk. He is going to break Starfleet protocol anytime that he can, and the captain should never leave the ship, but he's immediately on the way team down to rescue the green alien because it is appropriate for humanity. Feelers make the reaction, all new information, very much individual, very much to the time and place. And when we talk about these two worlds intermixing and we think about helping students to bridge and grow this continuum, we have the most humor, but perhaps the biggest challenge. Our students in the class of 2019, again, represent all of our medical students throughout the 4 years that are here in the building. We see a much more balanced on this continuum of what student preference is, but we do have a slight predominance for thinking at 54% and feeling at 46%.
When thinking about teaching examples, again, that thinking type has that preference for logical relationships in the learning materials and the concepts. They may say to the class, great question, that's in the book. It's also in the slide or in the PowerPoint.
We're looking for folks as they bridge these two continuums to look at developing self-management and maturing the worry of students.
There are a few ways that we think you can develop this type of self-management. Balancing your prompts, what you ask your class. Do you ask them, what do you think about the concept or idea that you're exploring? And then also asking them, how do you feel about that same content or idea that you're exploring? If you play around with those question types, you'll notice that students will respond differently.
Perhaps the most important work we do as we develop doctors is we found that if we develop students that have an increased awareness of the self, they're better able to make decisions about worry and respond appropriately, thinking or feeling wise to the material.
So let's go ahead and take a look at our class of 2019.
So our class of 2019, 17% of the students are perceiving students open to spontaneity. 83% of the students are judging students that would prefer to have beginnings, endings, and timelines throughout the course of their week.
You may look at this chart and wonder if our admissions team is only recruiting students who have that judging preference. But what we know about success types has to do that any of the types actually can be successful. That's the whole point. So it's not whether you're perceiving or judging if you can make it in medical school. It's figuring out how to be successful with your preference and then stretching yourself in the other area.
Part of why we've done this work is that we actually think this 17%, which is a definite minority in our school, already has advanced skill development in being flexible. They're just working on some judging skills and creating deadlines for themselves. The judging students, who are the majority of our students, are actually a little bit behind in some of the flexibility that's needed to be a physician. One of the things that we know as we look at the percentages of students that are judging and perceiving students is that we know the safety for our students in their first few blocks is that sequential organization that the professor exhibits, the planning in advance, to focus on the completion of the goals, and truly be completion-oriented to help students with that adjustment to medical school.
It's that thought of, I'm not sure what I need to know, but this person seems very organized, very planned. I know what the goals are, the learning objectives are clear, so I know they'll help me get there.
As they get a little bit more experience and understand the terminology better and begin to work with the concepts that they're learning and doctoring, they become much more comfortable with professors that are exploring. The organization isn't usually an outward organization that the perceiver has, but is very much process-oriented and focused on the goals that the student has with them.
During a student panel, one of our tutors shared a great quote about adjusting to medical school. And she said it so eloquently that part of her experience was just becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that a big part of it has to do with this P and J continuum.
I think the key thing as we look at, though, the continuum manages time, it's really about managing expectations for these students. Helping students to understand where does this fit into our time continuum is going to truly help them develop the skill of flexibility that they need in professionalism. When we initially take a Myers-Briggs or a learning style inventory, we get excited when we learn more about ourselves, but that's only a beginning. The goal with understanding learning styles is that we move beyond ourselves to incorporate others. Our goal with beginning with learning styles is that you have the opportunity to take learning styles beyond that initial introduction of this is what your learning style is, but to a second level of, and this is what the opposite of your learning style is. Because as we begin to employ that opposite is when we begin to reach more and more students.